Travel isn't just of interest, and I'm putting that in air quotes. It's actually becoming a priority for a range of consumers, including me.
I think we clearly see that travel has never been so top of mind for people all over the world. And that might have more to do than just the pandemic. About two-thirds of the people that we interviewed said that they're more interested to travel than ever before. If you take the younger generations, that number is even higher. You get to the 76% has never been so keen to travel. But that's really something that we've seen happening over the longer period of a decade, where there's really a shift from spending on possessions to spending on experiences, and even more so for the younger generations. And maybe the pandemic was a bit of a catalyst.
These Gen Zers are interesting because, particularly for them, travel has become a top priority. And in fact, last year, millennials and Gen Zers took on average nearly 5 trips versus less than 4 for Gen X and baby boomers. So the number one consideration that we clearly see for Gen Zers when selecting a destination is experiencing something new. So for the younger generation, there is a real draw towards using travel as a means of interacting with different cultures, exploring the unknown. And that also makes international travel increasingly appealing for these younger generations. International travel also feels in reach for them, right? The cost has come down, especially with the abundance of low-cost airline seats, convenience. It's easy for them to get oriented in the destination before they travel. Mobile connectivity overseas has become cheaper. It's easy to translate things when you get there. And then finally, also social media is, of course, helping them shape their ideas about also faraway destinations when they're thinking about their next trip. And 92% of the younger travelers report that they were influenced by social media in that sense. Yeah, social media makes the world feel smaller and bigger at the same time. So for the older generations, we see that for them, the number one travel motivator is actually visiting friends and family. So either to visit them or to travel with them. And that motivator is put far ahead of visiting a new place or going to a place that everybody's talking about. What we also see is that the older generations are actually very strategic about how they spend. So they say that 7% of the baby boomers say that they will go all out when they travel. That doesn't mean, by the way, that they're unwilling to spend in total, because baby boomers do spend 3 times more on travel than Gen Z. So they are willing to make their trip easy, convenient. They're willing to spend to make things more or less burdensome. They're willing to travel in the off season. They're less likely to try and save by taking a longer or connecting flight. And they are almost twice as likely as younger generations to cut expenses when needed, but they place emphasis really on the quality of their accommodation.
What's really interesting is, as Jasperina said, baby boomers spend 3 times more on travel than Gen Z. But for Gen Z, what they spend on travel is just a much higher share of their disposable income and wealth. What we see with older generations is actually quite a bit of fatigue with technology in the travel process, and feeling that if you're not a digital native, the steps of traveling have become quite challenging, which may be correlated or not to the fact that they tend to go more to destinations they're familiar with and have been to already, rather than explore new destinations, because then you can rely a bit less on those tools. And I think what that means is we're all for digital and analytics informed travel journey and travel process, but that doesn't have to come in the way of the human interaction. So really what we see with older generations is frustration of every single site or attraction you try to go to is now a vending machine that they're just struggling to interact with or get the right information from. And that's a little bit where some of the disconnects can happen. So using the power of Gen AI and analytics, but not necessarily replacing everything then with a machine on top of that. You start with the Chinese travelers. Yes, they're changing a lot, but there is still a very large chunk of that market that wants to prioritize these iconic travel experiences, bucket list, famous site type of holiday. That makes up about 69% of our Chinese respondents want that famous site for their next holiday, that bucket list type of holiday. For North American and European, that's only 20%. So 69% versus 20%. That's a very, very different preference. What we also see in the Chinese market is at the same time a real enthusiasm and passion that has truly been fueled by the pandemic of rediscovering their domestic heritage and traveling much closer to home. And so we see the Chinese domestic travel market growing at about 12% year on year in the coming years and overtaking very quickly the United States as the world's largest domestic travel market. On the other side, if you compare this, for example, with travelers from the UAE, from the United Arab Emirates, there also is a strong preference with that market to visit iconic destinations closer to the Chinese number. But what they're really after is very sort of active holidays, sport heavy holidays, being outdoors, hiking, doing some sort of exercise and very active vacation as part of their trip. On the other hand, if you take Europeans and North Americans, there was a lot more homogeneous in the preferences, where 40% really see the vacation as a way to just get away from it all, which is twice higher than Chinese or UAE based respondents. And of course, the best way to get away from it all is the traditional beach holiday, which remains the top purpose of travel for those markets. Travel safari company maybe being a bit more focused on older generations. They do spend more than younger generations. That's something we've established. They spend 3 times more. But if you actually start thinking maybe there is a new market in the younger generations, in Gen Z, to use as an example, because they are willing to spend disproportionately on experiences. But then the way you would engineer an experience for them, they might come on a low-cost flight, they might stay in a cheaper accommodation, but they will spend the $500 entrance fee to go gorilla trekking and have that experience. So there are these pockets of high willingness to spend. And that means you may also want to rethink your accommodation offering to be cheap without feeling cheap. And so it's a lot about maybe smaller rooms, maybe shared rooms, but high quality shared spaces, high quality open spaces, co-working spaces where people can mingle.
Yeah, we see that for this year expected, there's tourism will be a full 9% of global GDP. So it's creating a lot of new economic activity. And there's a lot of opportunity for stakeholders who are able to cater to new traveler preference.
Definitely see in our research that more than 70% of travelers say they've posted photos of their vacation on social media in a very systematic way. And of course, for younger generation, that's north of 95%. It's absolutely become the norm. And if we go back to the times of even ancient Greece, you will find various ways of capturing travel memories in some shape or form. We mentioned at the beginning of the survey that for Gen Z, 90% plus of them will have been influenced on their decision to go to a certain place based on these social media posts, especially the ones that they see from friends and families or from some of the celebrities that they trust. That creates a number of opportunities for the industry. Definitely everything related to social media strategy, influencer strategy, encouraging folks who come to visit to repost about the hotel, repost about the attraction, repost about the destination is key given how big this is in the consideration funnel of travelers. But also it's creating new opportunities for new businesses to emerge in that space of journaling, if you'd like. And we see microblogging platforms trying to give travelers a different way of sharing with friends and family outside of the traditional social media platforms, which is also really interesting.
I'm feeling a little bit bad for the sort of seaside sketch artist